not by sight. Amen. Hey everybody out there in Bible study land, these are your Bible study announcements. This is
Jody.
And I am
Pastor.
And your Bible study announcements this week are on location. Here we are at the ball field. Tell them why, Jody.
We're going to get ready to play some softball.
No, we're not.
Trunk or treat.
That's it. Trunk or treat tomorrow night, October 31st from 6 to 8 p.m. here on our ball field. We are going to give out tons and tons and tons tons.
I thought it was 2,000 pounds of candy that we're going to give out.
You're right. We're going to give out 1 ton of candy. So we want you to be here. Bring your kids, invite your neighbors, invite your neighbors, invite your coworkers, kids, invite everybody. But beyond that, we want you to be in prayer for the trunk or treat event. Yes, we're going to give out a ton of candy. Yes, we're going to see thousands of kids, but we are also going to be expressing the love of Jesus Christ in real, tangible ways. Thousands of kids are going to be interacting with our church members. So be in prayer for that. And also, each kid that comes through is going to receive a gospel coloring book. They are going to be handed a Bible. So be in prayer that these kids take these Bibles and these gospel coloring books home, and that God uses them to transform their lives. So trunk or treat, when?
Tomorrow night
From
6 to 8 p.m.
where?
Right here, ball field.
Be there. We are on location at The Rock to tell you all about Upward
Basketball.
Not Upwards. There's no S. Upward
Basketball.
Tell them, Jody.
And cheer.
And
Don't
cheer.
forget about cheer.
And cheer. Tell them.
Yes, now signups are available. Please sign up right now if you have a child, kindergarten through 6th grade. We want you to be a part. And also a chance for you, First Baptist Church, to be involved in this ministry. We need coaches, we need referees, we need help, we need support. So please contact
Halftime entertainment
to do like a
gospel
trick shot.
Gospel.
We need your help.
Did he make it? Upward basketball right here. You got this, Brady? No. That was a foot further back. That's in.
Now, sign up.
We are here in the hub.
In the hub. At the hub. In the hub's over there.
In the hub. We are at the hub because today we are collecting money for Be the Service. The Be the Service event takes place Saturday, November 19th. You'll hear more information about that in days to come. But for right now, we are collecting money for Be the Service. What does that money do?
That money feeds a family of 4. Thanksgiving meal, full turkey, sides, everything. For $10, you can feed a family of 4.
Absolutely. So right now we are just funding the Be the Service event. Come to the hub and provide your $10 or more to feed a family of 4. Be the Service.
Be here right now.
Today. We are here on location.
What location?
It's a secret location, an unknown location, undisclosed location, somewhere on a roof at your favorite church. And we risked our lives to be up here.
This shot right
We
here.
scaled a very sketchy ladder.
Found a key.
I knew where the key was, but you don't know where the key was. You don't know where the sketchy ladder is. But we did all of that to stand here to tell you Harvest Day taking place November 13th. November 13th. It's through our Harvest Day offering that we fund many of our gospel partners. So when you give to the Harvest Day offering, you help send the gospel both near and far. So our goal this year is $300,000. So we want you to spend these next few weeks in prayer and see how the Lord would lead you to give to the Harvest Day offering. Of course, you can give to the Harvest Day offering anytime if you put it in a Harvest Day envelope or simply mark it some way, somehow, Harvest Day. But all of our offering that we collect on November 13th will go to Harvest Day. So please be in prayer. What else you got to tell them, Jody?
Well, if you haven't joined us for worship, please come right over there in this building at 11 o'clock. We'd love to see you there. And then don't stop there. Come back tonight at 6 p.m.
6 p.m. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be a great time of worship and fellowship and reading of God's
Where
Word.
there'll be hand motions.
Lots of them.
Yes.
Lots of them. See you 11 p.m. to 11 and in the p.m.
How are we gonna
service.
get down?
I have no clue. My wife's here. She didn't want to be on camera. First lady is right over the cameraman's shoulder.
Katie, look out!
Katie!
Jesus, I love him more and more. Jesus saves and keeps me, and he's the one I'm living for. Every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before.
Good morning. Welcome to Radio TV Bible Class. First Baptist Church, Sulphur Springs, best church in the world. We're glad that you're watching on TV, listening to us on the radio. We're going to have a surprise teacher. He hadn't been here in 3 Sundays, so we're glad to. It would have been a real surprise this morning because we would have had a long singing session if he hadn't showed up. But we're glad that James is here. We appreciate Sandra and Lum for our music. I'm so glad y'all are here this morning. I see we have a vacant spot over here. Somebody's playing hooky this morning. But I want you to know that this is old-fashioned Sunday school like you grew up. We have wonderful teaching, good music, and a wonderful spirit in this class. Would you join me in a word of prayer this morning? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time that you've given us. Lord, we take so much for granted. And all you ask is us to believe in you, to trust you, depend on you. God, thank you so much for this group of people that have dedicated themselves to come and be a witness to you by just being here. Lord, thank you so much for our teacher, for our music, and for this time. These things we ask in your name. Amen.
Good to see you all this morning. Talking about young people. I was reminded by a certain person a minute ago, this song goes back to VBS days. And I told her that's what they say old people do, revert back to that. 217. 217. There is a name I love to hear, I love to sing its words. It sounds as music in my ear, the sweetest name on earth. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because He first loved me. It tells me of a Savior's love who died to set me free. It tells me of His precious blood, the sinner's perfect plea. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because He first loved me. It tells me what my Father has in store for me. And though I tried a darksome path, He's led us all the way. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because He first loved me. It tells of one whose loving heart can feel my deepest woe, who in deep sorrow bears a part that none can bear below. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because He first loved me. That's good singing on that old song, and we have a distinguished guest this morning that drove a few miles. He got town. I know who's doing it this morning. Good. There you. Good to have you this morning, son.
Good to be here. Thank you. Well, I learned Monday night just how old I actually am. I was invited to a banquet at Baylor on the top floor of the Cassian building. Now, that's a new one on me. 3/4 of all the buildings at Baylor were not there in the mid-1980s when I left there. It has gotten to be a massive campus that's bearing more resemblance to A&M or UT than to TCU. Just huge. When I tried to leave afterwards, I got lost. The Cassian building is built up into the side of what used to be the Hancomer Business Building. If James Litzler were here, he could tell you about his intimate acquaintance with that. And next to the law school, where he could talk about his intimate acquaintance with that. And I believe, William, was that your law school as well?
No, it's the old one.
Okay, the old one. It is. This banquet was in a totally glassed-in room on the 6th floor of the building. I had never had such a panoramic view of the campus or Waco or anything. When I entered that campus the first time in 1977, there were 8,500 enrollment. Now it's approaching 20,000. It is massive. And all of it very well done. As I understand, I think it was 14 years ago, they negotiated a loan of $12.8 billion at less than 1% interest. I don't know if that was Drayton McLean's credit rating or whose card that went on, but their construction has flowed from there. And even the Farrell Center, the basketball building that's relatively new, is being replaced because it's outmoded now. So it is huge. But what made me feel especially old was this banquet was for recipients of a very generous scholarship, the Guittard Fellowship, that was given to a graduate student per year to do the master's work, all expenses paid for a master's degree, and I very graciously was given. It was the grace of good professors who let me have it in 81, 82. And I discovered once I got there that there were 3 such fellowships given every year now. And those seated at my table were the recipients, and they were all aged 22 to 26. There was absolutely nobody there from the early 2000s, the 2010s, the 1990s, or the 80s, save myself, and I look just a little bit out of place in that group photograph. I know, it's, Charlotte, it doesn't get any better, does it? So, but a tremendous experience, and fascinating to me, because Baylor is one place you can go to meet some history professors who actually have given their life to Jesus Christ.
I know of several there who have, and many of them were hired for that reason, simply because they were PhDs and the best in their field, and they had a testimony. So it was nice to see some of those folks. Usually in the realm of history and social sciences in college, you find the greatest amount of skepticism at various campuses, greatest amount of skepticism here and there. I can never forget the reaction when the great Russian Nobel Prize winner, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, was finally released by the Soviet Union. He was very persona non grata because of his epic works about Stalin's Gulag and the time of Khrushchev and Gulag Archipelago and Gulag II and Cancer Ward and One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And they finally let him go from the Soviet Union after years of people wanting him to. The first place he spoke was the commencement exercise at Yale University. And you had all these professors sitting there, and if you can ever get a tape of it, I saw a tape of it once, I can't find it now even online. Watch their reactions of the faculty sitting behind him as he begins to speak about the state of America, where he has just arrived. He said, America was once great because America was good. And he quoted Alexander Alexis de Tocqueville, who traveled here in 1832 and had made that pronouncement, saying he'd found the strength of America in its churches in 1832, and that's what set it apart from any other country. Solzhenitsyn then told his assembled Yale audience, America is losing its greatness because America is no longer emphasizing being good. He said spiritual vitality is in the East, where they have suffered, and the church has suffered, and persecution has made them come out refined like fire. Here in America, you are becoming so much weaker for purely spiritual reasons that you will soon find your young men defending your own border against those who would seek to overcome and enter it. He predicted this in 1976. Looking at the Yale professors around, you could see squirming. It was, I don't want to say hilarious, it was fascinating. See about that many agnostics and atheists and some who are outright communists just squirming in their seats right there. And the fact is that America at one time sowed great vitality unto itself spiritually. And it's been a long time since the largest number have done that. We have been sowing good seed, but we've also been sowing bad seed to our own nation's destruction. And how do you distinguish the two? Well, good seed produces good fruit. Bad seed produces rotten fruit. And you don't have to have eyes open to see that that has happened in so many areas. I was in a discussion with some colleagues recently. They were discussing the 1950s and what was wrong with the 50s. We all agreed Jim Crow was something that was still wrong in the 50s. And this one young lady who was post-Generation X said, I don't like the way women were treated. I don't like the way girls were treated in the 50s. And even our most liberal colleagues said, well, actually, girls didn't have it that bad. Women had restrictions in the 50s in terms of employment and things like that. They made Rosie the Riveter go back to the kitchen after World War II, so to speak. But he said, no, girls didn't have it that bad. And then I added one thing. In the 50s, 95% of American houses left their front doors unlocked at night. That was the result of 200 years of good fruit being grown in this land. Well, Hosea, I know that Eddie and James, because I listened to them while I was down with diverticulitis the last 2 weeks, and I heard how they pronounced things beautifully in the first part of Hosea. Today we're in Hosea chapter 10. I was so shocked after spending my childhood watching Andy Griffith and a certain PFC in the USMC from Mayberry to learn the name of Hosea's wife, which was Gomer. That's where Gomer is in the Bible. You see a biblical name? Yes, you do. I only then learned that having a name like Gomer was parallel to having a name like Jezebel. It's biblical, but I'm not sure that many people want to tie to the original thing. I still like the name Gomer, but Here in Hosea chapter 10, he says, Israel is a luxuriant vine that yields its fruit. The more his fruit increased, the more altars he built. As his country improved, he improved his pillars, his religious temples. Their heart is false. Now they must bear their guilt. The Lord will break down their altars and destroy their pillars. Why? These pillars, these altars were not to God. They were to gods, plural. They were to false gods. They were to demon gods. They were not to the God who cared about their heart and whose heart they should have been seeking. For now they will say, we have no king, for we do not fear the Lord, and a king, what could he do for us? That was the point in which they were having an assassination every other year. And so the stability of the king was not good. However, Hosea is writing at this time when the economy is just beautifully off the chart. I think James Nettie did a good way of describing that. They had had an economic surge. Whatever is the opposite of a recession is what they were having. Their economic impact spread regionally. They had actually, if not militarily, taken over whole sections of Syria, of the Aramaeans who had fought them for years simply because their economic power was so good. And let's face it, the northern kingdom of Israel was always more blessed with resources than the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom of Judea was mostly hills. If you go there now, which I know William and Charlotte have, do you ever see rocks? Fairly abundant. And the northern regions, what we would call Galilee today, tended to be a better agricultural base. And for that reason, the northern kingdom had more room to prosper. In addition, it was on the more accepted trade routes running from Egypt to Mesopotamia, passed not through Jerusalem, but through the cities of the north. They were part of this northern kingdom of Israel. So Israel had always done economically better than Judah, and now Israel was experiencing an incredible surge of prosperity under Jeroboam II. And people actually, there's a reference to it, I believe in Amos, that people had summer houses in the Syrian city of Hamath and summer mansions. It was like having, a lodge, your own private lodge, not a timeshare, but an actual lodge all your own at Estes Park or Aspen or someplace like that. That's how prosperous the northern kingdom had gotten. But he says the more prosperous you get, the more you build to other gods. The more you are sowing bad seed, because you feel like you have the room to do it. You say, we have no king, for we do not fear the Lord. And a king, what could he do for us? They utter mere words with empty oaths. They make covenants. So litigation springs up like poisonous weeds in the furrows of the field. Now, looking at William and looking at Eddie, I know you've never seen any litigation that seemed negative over anything whatsoever. That there's never been litigation that had a deleterious effect on anyone. I'm sure it's always positive all the time whenever litigation's involved. Negative. Okay. Like poisonous weeds in the furrows of the field. Why in the furrows? Because they weren't the first plowed up. Therefore, you have weeds springing up. The inhabitants of Samaria, that's the great city of the north, tremble for the calf of Beth-aven. That is a pun. You think the Bible doesn't use humor? It does. Beth-aven is a result to this, is a reference to the city of Bethel. Jeroboam the first, who broke away from Solomon, son Rehoboam, who split the kingdom, who seceded from the south, started this northern kingdom of Israel. First thing he did was build a golden calf at Bethel. He knew that Bethel was the religious center of the south. And he built another one at the northern end of his new kingdom at Dan, way up north in what is today, more or less, Lebanon-Israel border. He had two golden calves, one facing south, one facing north, to represent his new kingdom that was separated from God's line through David. He wanted to really emphasize it, and he did it in a pagan way. Well, Bethel was the name of it. Bethel means Beth, house, El, God, house of God. Bethel means house of God. They'd had it as a religious center even before Jerusalem. It had been a worship center for God, but Jeroboam had turned it into a pagan site, a demonic site at times. And that's why he doesn't say Bethel, he says Beth Aven, house of wickedness. They knew very well what he was saying when he said Beth Aven. They knew he was taking the name Bethel and crunching it. House of wickedness. Its people shall mourn for it, and its idolatrous priests shall wail over it, over its glory that has departed from it. It is going down. That place is going down. And we know later, a few decades later, the great Assyrian king, powerful Assyrian king Shalmaneser, took that calf all the way back to Nineveh and gave it to his generals. Whether they melted it down and split it up, who knows, but it sure could not protect itself. And that's something these people weren't willing to face. The thing itself shall be carried to Assyria as tribute to the great king. Ephraim, which is a synonym for all the northern tribes, shall be put to shame, and Israel shall be ashamed of his idol. Whereas Judah had been the most populous of the southern tribes, and therefore the land came to be synonymous with that, Ephraim, who was one of Joseph's sons, his descendants were the most populous of the northern tribes, therefore, and plus the city of Samaria was located right smack in their territory. So when you said Ephraim, you also meant the 10 northern tribes, because it was the biggest. Judah was the south, which contained Benjamin and most of Levi in addition to it. And it'll be put to shame. Israel shall be ashamed of his idol. Samaria's king shall perish like a chip on the face of the waters. The high places of Aven, the high places of that place of wickedness, the sin of Israel shall be destroyed. Thorn and thistle shall grow up on their altars. They shall say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. This is a chapter that is replete with agriculture and using agricultural descriptions nonstop. Now, how many of you were raised in an agricultural setting? At a place, yeah, I figured some. At one time, we were the dairy capital of Texas. In terms of quality dairy, I still say we're ahead of Comanche County and Erath County and those, but this was very much an agricultural area. In fact, throughout the history of mankind on earth, agriculture has been the main economic activity. Even those places that depended throughout history on trade and mercantile and merchant to grow wealth still had an agricultural base they depended on. The ancient Phoenicians in what was Lebanon were the greatest mercantile merchant traders and wealthy people of the ancient world, but even they had a strong agricultural base, not only in wheat, but also in olive oil and vineyards. And the Dutch, who were the most famous and successful merchants from the time period of the 1500s to the 1800s, they had an agricultural base. That's why they kept draining their land and putting up what to pump the water out of their land? Dikes and what to pump the water out? Windmills. Windmills and dikes, and reclaiming land and devising new methods of planting that would drain the salt from the soil, linseed and clover and things like that. Agricultural base. So using an agricultural thing here is not at all out of place in the time period in which he's writing. That's what everyone depended on. That's what every kingdom depended on. Every nation's wealth in the ancient world really hinged on agriculture. You didn't have it, it didn't matter what else you had. So agriculture is an excellent way of putting this. Jesus used agricultural stories left and right because it's what people knew. It's what they could see around them happening at all times. Since the days of Gibeah, you have sinned, O Israel. There they have continued. Shall not war overtake them in Gibeah? I will come against the wayward people to punish them, and nations shall be gathered against them when they are punished for their double iniquity. Ephraim was a trained heifer that loved to thresh, and I spared her fair neck. But I will make Ephraim break the ground. Judah must plow, Jacob must harrow for himself. Sow for yourselves righteousness, reap steadfast love. Break up your fallow ground. For it is time to seek the Lord that he may come and rain righteousness upon you. Rain was a good word back then. Some of us were starting to feel that very much this later part of this summer. Sow for yourselves righteousness. Don't plant bad seed. Plant good seed. How many of you ever remember a time in which cotton was big in East Texas? Okay. It has been. It's moved west steadily more. What caused cotton to be an issue after the Civil War was the depletion of the land. What happens if you grow cotton on the same patch of soil for 50 years in a row without interruption? It's going to make that soil poor. Hundreds or thousands of years of soil accumulation wasted within 50 years. I live in a part of North Dallas that was first planted in cotton right after the Civil War on that blackland soil. And by the time I arrived there as a little kid in 1970 and wanted to plant a tree, even in wet weather, I had to use a pick and shovel to dig down 6 inches. It was just so rock solid, unfertile anymore. It was just horrible. Cotton would do that over time. That's why we see the original tidewater regions of the east being depleted in soil. They had to move cotton cultivation to the west once Eli Whitney made it pay with his cotton gin that could make the small fibers that grew well in the west do well. Alabama began to surge, and then others. And then after the Civil War, Texas. The more you found less depleted soil, that's where you went to grow your cotton. But the depleted soil was showing very negative effects all across the South. Most of the farmers, especially the poor farmers, had no choice but to farm what they had, and that was most of the South. You know, as late as the Tennessee Valley Authority of 1937, they were still trying to teach farmers along the Tennessee and Cumberland and tributary rivers, don't plow straight up and down on your hillside farm. Plow in contours. Plow in contours. Why contours? Topsoil's not going to wash away that way. You plow straight down as your ancestors had done for 100 years, it's no wonder if you lost a foot of topsoil into the rivers. What was their response? What was the response to these farmers, the standard response? We've always done it that way. My father, my grandfather, his father before him, we've always done it that way. Who are you young whippersnappers out of, if you're at Tennessee and Auburn University and NC State telling us what to do? The resistance was there. The soil was depleted. The soil was horrible. Made it worse in 1895 when a little critter entered Texas, first discovered in the Corpus Christi area, that would blanket the cotton fields of the South. The boll weevil. That made it even worse. Now you had depleted soil plus the boll weevil. And it was wise men who could see the erosion that was devastating things there. Enter a bad seed situation. At the Philadelphia Exposition of 1876, some agronomists introduced a miracle plant that came from the east. You would plant it, and once established, it would grow a foot a day, out to 100 feet, and when it reached 100 feet, its mass of leaves and foliage were perfect for grazing. As long as they were young and young leaves and the stems weren't too thick, cows, deer, horses would just eat that stuff up. The roots, when it was 100 feet long, the roots of that one plant would weigh close to half a ton. So its root system was phenomenal for holding soil. They said this is the perfect answer to erosion. This is a guaranteed drought answer to forage for your cattle. And the Chinese had learned you could pound the roots up into medicinal powder. The Japanese had learned to pound the roots into a flour, from which you could make bread and things like that. So this is the miracle plant. Everyone was fascinated. But then the Pennsylvania state authorities required them to destroy those plants rather than let them out because they were kind of worried about, the possibility of something being invasive. 1883, it showed up again at the New Orleans Exposition. This time, they gave out samples of it to some of the wealthier people attending the New Orleans Expedition who wanted to correct the drought situations and erosion situations on their plantations and farms in Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana. But not until the Dust Bowl hit and the boll weevil hit and everything else hit did the government step in in the 1920s, especially 1930s, and produce 75 million seedlings of this plant to distribute across the South, to stop the erosion, to accomplish all these miracles. Yet I said bad seed. What plant am I talking about? Kudzu. Kudzu. Awful lot of people regretted pulling in kudzu across the land. The Garden Club of Atlanta declared at the end of World War II of the kudzu problem they saw along the roads and highways that 9 million acres had been covered in this invasive plant that blocks out the sun and kills every tree it touches, given enough time, which it was doing. It wasn't quite 9 million acres, though. More scholars said it's more like 2.5 million acres. Nonetheless, they called it the plant that ate the South. That was an example of planting bad seed. And you have to know where your seed's going. A bad seed can result in a bad crop, a bad harvest. This is what Amos is saying. You in the north, you in the northern tribes have been planting bad seed ever since your first king put up those golden calves. And you have been continuing it. You have plowed wickedness. You have reaped injustice. You have eaten the fruit of lies. Because you trusted in your power and the multitude of your warriors. What does that mean? Israel's population in the north was considerably larger than Judah's population in the south. They could have mass formations. Ahab had tried to depend on that when he fought the Arameans. They had a much bigger army than the south. And they were resting on the fact that who cares how corrupt we are? Who cares if we know God or not? Our economy is strong. Our economy is strong, and we have warriors that can handle things for us. Who would say that's a bit overconfident, considering the land they live in? Crossroads of the world where thousands of battles have always been fought. He is saying the wickedness, and the wickedness Eddie and James have referred to, and then back in the book of Amos, the corruption, the buying of judges, the twisting of justice, the abandonment of widows and orphans, all the negative things that were taking place in this society. He's saying it's going to come back to bite you. You've planted the wickedness. You're going to reap corruption. You have trusted in your power and in the multitude of your warriors. Therefore, the tumult of war shall rise up against your people. The very thing you think you're strongest at is where you're going to be overcome. It's where you're going to be knocked down. And all your fortresses will be destroyed. They were quite proud of the construction of some of their fortresses. They thought, okay, this one is siege-proof. We've got this one in order. Our technology is so good. Scholars will tell you that because of their contact, the Northern Kingdom's contact with the wider world, they did have some points of technology the Southern Kingdom did not have. Although the Southern Kingdom did a pretty good one. Under Hezekiah, I'm looking at William and Charlotte to see if they took you there. One of the key points, if you have the ability to go down, and it's not always easy, Hezekiah built a what for siege? A tunnel of incredible engineering achievement from the Pool of Siloam to get water in the event of a siege. It was a masterpiece that people still can't figure out because they started at both ends and had the miracle to meet in the middle in the construction. And all they know is they had a plumb line. That takes some pretty clever usage of it. Today we use ground tracing sonar and things like that to make sure they'll meet in the middle. Somehow they did it. Israel was every bit proud of its stuff, as Judah was of that tunnel. And they thought this will protect. So we are sitting fine. Who cares what God thinks? We've got golden calves. Who cares how we behave with those golden calves, with temple prostitution and, in some cases, sacrificing firstborn to demon gods? Who cares? We've got the economy. We've got this. We've got that. Hosea is saying, this has sowed wickedness, and you will reap wickedness and corruption. You've eaten the fruit of lies. Shalman destroyed Beth Arbel on the day of battle, when mothers were dashed in pieces with their children. What's that about? Shalman is believed to be Shalmaneser. It's short for the Assyrian emperor Shalmaneser. And what was this Beth Arbel? It is believed to be the city of Irbid on the border, right where Jordan and Syria and Israel come together, just southeast of the Sea of Galilee. It is Jordan's second largest city today. It is believed that 3,000 years ago, after Amman, it is the second largest city, population about that of Austin, like 600,000 plus. It is the most high-tech city today. It has more internet cafes per capita than any city on earth today. It is a unique spot in the Middle East to have that type of thing. It's even landlocked. It's not even a port city. But in the ancient times, it was prosperous as well. They've gone back and looked at it at the time that Hosea is talking about. Its agriculture was phenomenal in that area. They were 3 major road trade routes. Their prosperity was off the chart, and apparently their city walls were quite formidable. Their city fortifications were formidable, and they had wealth. It didn't stop them when the Assyrians came through. It did not stop the Assyrians come through. The Assyrians destroyed it, which left people somewhat in awe because it had been this great city at this incredible location. And the atrocities that followed were just almost unspeakable. Their agriculture, by the way, still lasted into the Roman period. Roman writers tell us 2 things about that area. The best fish in the world that you could get in Rome were shipped in from the Sea of Galilee, dried and salted heavily. Interesting to me is that ichthyologists tell us that fish from the Sea of Galilee is something we eat frequently today. Tilapia, big fat tilapia. I don't know if you ever heard what they say about tilapia, what fishermen will say about them. If you can ever catch them in some of these South Texas lakes, see how the phrase goes. They breed like rabbits, they grow like weeds, they fight like big bass, and they taste like chicken. And, and that's what they had in the Sea of Galilee. That's what Peter and John and James and the sons of Zebedee and all of them were actually more or less what we call blue-collar middle class on the Sea of Galilee when Jesus called them. But they were shipping out those fish. Not very far away, the city of Irbud, which was not technically within Herod's or Pontius Pilate's territory, but it was just across the border, had the greatest grapes of the ancient world. They said Romans did their best to obtain anything made from those grapes. Kind of reminds me of what they described when the 12 spies went into the Holy Land to seek it out and reported back to Moses that the grapes were incredible. They had 1 vine of grapes where each grape looked like it was the size of a small apple. And they carried it so heavy they had to carry it between them. I have dreamed of the day my muscadines would go like that. But would love that to happen. But that great, powerful, agriculturally based city was destroyed by the Assyrians. They cut through it like a knife through butter. They were the first great empire, all-encompassing empire of the Middle East, owned everything from the Persian Gulf, almost to the Persian Gulf, to all of Egypt. It was an incredible empire and a cruel and deadly empire. He is saying, the Assyrians are coming. You have sown corruption. You have sown wickedness. Now the crop you're reaping will be judgment, will be that judgment. You know, they keep using agricultural metaphors, and we live in a high-tech age in which some countries that are super advanced don't call themselves an agricultural power. They call themselves a service industry power or a commercial industry power or a fiber optic power. But agriculture is still the basis of everything. One of America's greatest strengths has been our self-sufficiency in most forms of agriculture. Throughout the Cold War, that was our greatest strength. At the height of the Cold War, what was Russia desperate to buy from us some years? Wheat. We had these massive wheat shipments because Russia, together with Ukraine, could not produce enough certain years, but we could. God had blessed us with that great agricultural resource. We may have seen ourselves as the greatest technological power in the world at the time, but our agriculture was just second to none all the way. Today, food shortages around the world. Agriculture is at the forefront of things once again. Our computer technology will feed those who have it, but for most of the world, no. Bangalore, India is an incredible tech center. It's the Silicon Valley of Asia. But you've got 1.3 billion people in India who are still heavily dependent on agriculture. Our food prices in the stores depend on agriculture. We've seen them climb in the last few months. Agriculture is still where it's at. What famous media magnate has bought up as much surface water land in northern New Mexico and as much groundwater land in southern New Mexico and a good chunk of the Ogallala Aquifer in Nebraska to safeguard water. Media mogul. Ted Turner. His companies. Jim Hoffa. Bill Gates. Gary's right. Big fight with the Mormon Church over 250,000 acres of groundwater in eastern Washington State, the drier part of Washington State. And they have a good chance of beating him. But other corporations are buying up all the water and potential ag land they can of Arizona and other areas. The Panhandle of Texas. T. Boone Pickens had bought quite a bit, and then he promptly began giving it to the city of Amarillo and various others. But the Chinese are investing sometimes in shadow companies, sometimes outright, to get as much American agriculture and water land as they possibly can. Agriculture is still thematic, as it was in Hosea's time when he used agricultural metaphors for everything about that society. Then it shall be done to you, O, and finally he says the word Bethel, O supposed house of God, because of your great wickedness. At dawn the king of Israel shall be utterly cut off. He's saying this at the time when they are at the height of their power, their glory, and economic success, and he's telling them, you are going down. Not because your technology is deficient, not because your wealth is deficient, because you have not focused on what is right. Jesus tells us there's two things you can sow to. You can sow to the Spirit, or you can sow to the flesh. To the flesh, you reap corruption. To the Spirit, you reap life and love. The main thing that Amos and Hosea have been telling Samaria and Judah and the surrounding nations is your deficiency is in love. You have deficient love. You're acting out of wrong motivations. You're sowing to corruption because your motivation is wrong. Love is what is produced by sowing to the Spirit. Sowing to the Spirit, you reap the Spirit. You reap God's love. You people don't care about that because you've got a strong economy and a decent military, and you think your technology is better, and therefore you are self-sufficient, so you think. It harkens to mind Jesus' parable that I had a hard time understanding when I first heard it. There was a man who built himself barns. And what did you use barns for? Storing crops, stockpiling. And he said, God comes to him one night and says, foolish man, your life is required of you. Who gets your barns now? The short-sightedness of sowing to the flesh is obvious. The long-term blessing of sowing to the Spirit is what he's urging these people to do. A lot will not listen. A lot get angry. We see what happens to the prophets over and over. Elijah got brutalized by the northern kingdom when Jezebel was running things. Elisha suffered weird spiritual attacks simply because they knew that God's mantle rested on him. And recall the incident where he's passing Bethel itself, that very wicked city. How wicked? It had a gang of youths come out and badger the newly anointed prophet Elisha. Soon after Elijah was taken home in a chariot of fire, Elisha's passing Bethel in the northern kingdom, the place they built the golden calf, the place that was the center of pagan worship. How that affected the culture of its people. It speaks of all the young people, 42 young people at least, coming out and mocking him as he went by. Mocking him for having a bald head. There may have been some other entendre involved with that, but all we know is these were not nice kids. And by the way, they were not toddlers. So often I've seen atheists and agnostics say, how could God punish little toddlers just because they're mouthing off? They weren't toddlers. The word youth in the Bible describes older teens. Let's just say that they were older teenage thugs. About the same age David was when he killed Goliath. Same word is used both places. And they were just mocking him over and over. At the very least, what they're saying is, you bald-headed guy, get up there the way Elijah did. They're mocking the power of God. That was in the culture of Bethel after centuries of paganism and demonic practice. Get up there, get up there, get up there, bald head, baldy, baldy, baldy. And he turned and cursed them. And what happened? An incredible spanking happened. An angry she-bear. You know how angry a bear gets when its cubs are bothered? That's what you have Mama Bear, angry Mama Bear, come down and said it tore up all 42 of them. Doesn't say they had 42 funerals. It just said it mauled them good. I call it a good whooping. A good heavy whooping is what God delivered to these thuggish teenagers. But they had been the products of that nasty culture, that horrible culture that had produced that type of evil. One of my favorite passages about generational sowing comes from the Chronicles of Narnia, the 5th book, although C.S. Lewis later said before he died he should have made it the first book, called The Magician's Nephew. You have Polly Plumer and Diggory Kirke, who are 2 little kids who find themselves in a parallel universe where other worlds exist. I know that C.S. Lewis was contemporary with Einstein, so I'm only guessing that quantum mechanics and others, he already had being at Oxford and Cambridge for so long, he would understand that. And they enter this abandoned palace on this dying planet, and it's a magnificent hallway that has wax or some kind of figures, mannequins, perfect replicas of all the kings and queens of that great land. And they walk down looking at the faces of these mannequins, all seated in thrones, hundreds of them. The first ones looked noble and kind. You knew you could trust them. The next ones began to look a little more solemn. And he says, you got the feeling you'd have to mind your P's and Q's around people who look like this. A little further, they start to look mean. Even further, they start to look evil, but happy. Finally, at the end, they look evil, but not happy. Their ancestors had sowed corruption gradually, and it had overtaken those generations. We're not stuck with generational curses. Jesus has freed us from that. But it is our duty to make sure we are sowing good things, not just to our own blood kin, but to all those around us, those our age and those younger. Sowing the fruits of love with pure motivations. That is what a Christian can do that is as good as missionary work. Eddie could sing this song, I can't. Eddie could probably name the composer, I can't, and the singer, I can't. When I got to heaven, a man approached, said, I was in your Sunday school class.
That's a Johnny Ross song right there.
Johnny, can you quote it for? Can you sing it for us? Thank you for giving to the Lord. Every little thing he did out of selflessness was a seed planted in God's favor. You didn't have much money. You dropped in the offering plate. God took that gift you gave, and that's why I'm here today, said a man from deepest India. Every little thing we do that is motivated by love is a seed well planted. It is a seed planted. It's being a missionary in our own environment right here. Whenever our motivation is selfless and love, we are being missionaries for Jesus Christ. Because ultimately, He is the only one who can maintain that in us all the time. I've known some very secular people who can be very nice and all the time. Sometimes their motives may be pure, but they can't do it indefinitely. Jesus calls upon us to do it consistently. As we grow in our relationship with Him,